Top of the morning and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines: Ukrainian drones attack electric grid in Kursk region. No casualties reported. Russia's President Vladimir Putin says votes in Russian-held parts of Ukraine mark steps towards full entry into Russia. Plus, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu meet in Kyiv, discuss joint weapons production. Thank you for joining us. 5 settlements and a hospital in Russia's southwestern Kursk region lost power this morning following a Ukrainian drone strike. In a telegram post, Kursk Governor Roman Starovoyt says the region, which borders Ukraine, was attacked en masse by Ukrainian drones. One drone dropped explosives on an electricity substation in the Belovsky district, causing a transformer to catch fire. But Russia's defense ministry says its air defenses had destroyed 10 Ukrainian drones over Kursk and 1 over the Kaluga region southwest of Moscow. No casualties have been reported so far. Meanwhile, workers in Moscow are putting the final touches to a stage on Red Square for an event due to hold today, marking the first anniversary of referendums held in 4 Ukrainian regions controlled by Russia. Russia said a year ago that it was annexing the 4 regions in an act condemned as unlawful by most countries at the United Nations. President Vladimir Putin has called the election exercise conducted this month in Russian-held parts of Ukraine a step towards their full integration into Russia. The votes in Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, all partly under Russia's control, following its full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, were denounced by Kyiv as illegal. Russia is set to increase defense spending by almost 70% in 2024, as Moscow pours resources into its full-scale offensive in Ukraine. The Kremlin deems this sharp increase necessary in what Russia reiterates is a hybrid war unleashed by the West. Defense spending will jump to almost 10.8 trillion rubles. That's about $111.15 billion, totaling about 6% of GDP, more than spending allocated for social policy. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has made an unannounced visit to Kyiv, meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky. He says Ukrainian forces were gradually gaining ground in their counteroffensive against Russian forces. He announced that NATO now has overarching framework contracts in place with arms companies worth 2.4 billion euros for key ammunition, including 1 billion euros in firm orders. He condemned Russia's strikes near Ukraine's border with NATO member Romania, saying there is no evidence such strikes were a deliberate attack on Romania, but reckless and destabilizing.
Today, your forces are moving forward. They face fierce fighting, but they are gradually gaining ground. Every meter that Ukrainian forces regains is a meter that Russia loses. And there is a stark contrast. Ukrainians are fighting for their families, their future, their freedom. Moscow is fighting for imperial delusions. Today, I can confirm that NATO now has framework contracts in place for 2.4 billion euros worth of key ammunition, including 1 billion euros of firm orders. This covers capabilities like 155mm artillery, anti-tank guided missiles, and main battle tank ammunition. This will help allies to refill their stocks while continuing to support Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Commander of the Joint Forces of Armed Forces of Ukraine, Serhiy Nahiv, visited a firing range in Kyiv within the week. He personally tested Ally-provided weapons and says the soldiers undergoing the exercises will be sent to Ukraine's south and east, where active fighting is taking place. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu attended a meeting in Kyiv on Thursday amidst Russia's attack on Ukraine. After their meeting, the residence, that is the President's office, revealed in a statement that they had discussed the possibility of joint weapons production and bolstering Ukraine's air defenses ahead of winter. He also met with his Ukrainian counterpart, Rustem Umerov. President Zelensky expressed his gratitude to French President Emmanuel Macron for military assistance. He highlighted, in particular, the supply of anti-aircraft missile systems, Caesar self-propelled artillery units, and Scalp cruise missiles. Now let's talk to senior lecturer at the Ruskin University, London, Dr. Tony Agbons, who speaks to us virtually from the UK in London. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning, Olumide.
As did Crimea go, so will these other regions of Ukraine go, Luhansk, the Zaporizhia region, and the other areas where there's to be an election where President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, says this will make authentic their integration into Russia. What are we to make of this in lieu of the fact that the NATO Secretary General, as we just saw, says that Ukraine is making incremental gains? If they're making such gains, how is it that that area is so peaceful that they can hold elections for them to be integrated into Russia?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I was listening to your intro before I came in, a very robust one at that. When you look at some of the news filtering in from Ukraine and Russia at this material point in time, it is very disappointing. It is energy sapping for lovers of peace across the world. And I must tell you that this crisis is going to a level of senselessness at the moment. Apologies for my language. Because it's so disappointing that just a week after the United Nations General Assembly, all the information we are getting and the optics we are seeing is really so sad. And you recall that Russia had a sham referendum in these areas you mentioned, at the beginning of this crisis. And everybody could see that it was not really a referendum. It was going to be a yes vote anyway. So it is really, really something that beats the imagination, the way this crisis is going. And, talking about the NATO Secretary General, Stoltenberg's, speech, yesterday, that was kind of a bit heartwarming, at least for those who support the Ukrainian cause.
Do you think it's able to work the way it is working for the Russians in these areas, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Crimea, because there are elements in those areas, though Ukrainian, but support the Russians? Or has Russia flushed those areas with pro-Russian separatists?
Yeah, there are people in these regions you have mentioned now. There are people, who speak the Russian language. There are people who have a Russian heritage. Let's not forget that the whole of this Ukraine, countries like Georgia and all the rest, they were all part of the USSR, the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic. And then we saw the split that happened towards the tail end of Mikhail Gorbachev leadership in the USSR. So, and there have been other countries that have split, and they still carry their language and all that, even not just in Russia, Ukraine, but in other part of the world, Asia, Africa, and all that. So, but you let them be. So, if there was no crisis, many international experts will say, okay, let's have a proper referendum. You want to be part of the Russian Federation as it is now? Then the people can make their decision. You see what is happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan at the moment. So these things, in a moment of crisis, they are very difficult, to put a handle on.
Russia is ramping up defense spending to the trillions of rubles, also translating into trillions of dollars. The first thing that jumped into my mind was next year as well, that is for 2024 they're projecting, is the same year that President Vladimir Putin is up for his term limit to be up. And he had previously, prior to this, said he will not seek re-election. It doesn't seem that that will be the case.
No, definitely. Olumide, you and I know that he's going to definitely seek re-election. There's no way he's going to, leave the stage at this point where, according to, the Russian government, they are the one that is, that is being, attacked. Their sovereignty, their territorial integrity is being stretched. So definitely he's going to contest. But when I heard you mention the budget, $111 billion, that is almost 70% of their current budget. Yeah. So, and I think the defense minister was even saying that this for national defense is now their priority. So the message the Russians are sending to the other parts of the world is that they are in this war for the long haul. So they are not, going to retreat. They are not going to stop this aggression. Just early this morning, Ukrainian infrastructure was hit by missiles. Yesterday, 3 women were killed in Kherson, and this has continued on. Even on the Russian side, some Ukrainian drones, destroyed some electrical grid in the Kursk region in the southwest of Russia. So the way this crisis is going is deepening, it is escalating, and it's just, like I said, it's just so sad that the whole world is just watching and gaping, and nobody is really doing anything about it. So with this increase in defense budget, you will see that the Russians, and they are very ready, and they are not ready to back down yet.
Speaking of those escalations, Romania has pointed out that drone debris has fallen again on its borders with Ukraine in the areas of Odessa where Russia is attacking. Now, it has been complained about by elements in Romania, even though the Prime Minister says there's nothing to see here, we're not being attacked. The drone debris that was even found wasn't operational to the extent that it was a danger to any of our citizens. But these are the collateral effects of this war. What's your point or your view?
Absolutely. They are the collateral effect. We could even say they are the ripple effect. It is expected when there is a crisis, nations around the border and the perimeter, they are bound to be affected. We know this kind of thing has happened with Poland before, and some people died. So it is expected. And at the end of the day, if you look at the nations that are bordering Ukraine, a lot of them have been drawn into this crisis. Refugees have moved in, and even their own economy is affected. You saw the problem with the grain issue, that because of Russia not resigning the Black Sea grain agreement. So most of these grains, to enter Europe, they had to go through Poland and Romania and not the rest, and it was affecting their own agricultural economy. So definitely these other neighboring countries near Ukraine, they are having some real indirect impact from this war. And when you even stretch it further, I think the entire world, the global economy is reeling from all this.
The Romanian president seemed to be on a different page than the Romanian prime minister. He seemed to be more upset about the incident, and he brought up the fact that they are NATO members. What will it take for NATO to get involved if Russia carelessly or unintentionally caused that incident to occur that would affect a NATO member?
Yeah, I think at that point, Article 5 will be activated. But I think for me, this looks more like a splinter attack. It wasn't indirect. So this is not likely going to cause activation of that clause in the NATO treaty. So, and Russia, when you look at Russia, I tell people, and you look at the history of that country, when they were even USSR, they are very deft. They is a strategic country. They don't just do things anyhow. They are like chess masters. They play the game. So I don't think Russia will be that, naive to attack a nation, a NATO country. They won't do that.
You've talked about at the beginning in your opening about the intransigence of possibly both nations, where this conflict has been has been made to escalate to this point, and it continues to eviscerate any form of peace from both sides. At this juncture that we are you hopeful or pessimistic that next year will be the same as this year or even worse?
To be honest, Olomide, I'm beginning to cross the line of hope and optimism when it comes to this crisis, especially when during the United Nations General Assembly, the 78th session that just took place in New York, nothing concrete was done. And for many of us, it just goes to show that the UN, as a global body, has once again, failed in its core responsibility and core assignment of maintaining global peace. So it was just all talk and speeches, and nothing concrete was done. So I am not really optimistic, and when you look at it, the way the Russians are increasing their defense budget, even NATO and the EU, they are saying that they are going to increase their own defense budget as well. They are going to increase their support for, Ukraine in terms of supply of military artillery and all that. And then the US election is coming up in 2024. So there is a lot of dynamics that are going to come into play. The Republicans, their body language is not, really, some of them, not all, but some of the major players in the Republican Party, they are not really in support of continuous military, aid to Ukraine. So all these are some of the interplay of forces that we're going to see as we move into the year 2024. The crisis is not going to abate as it seems at the moment.
And that body language, as you brought it up, Dr. Agbons, is very good that you did so, because it has caused for there to be a potential government shutdown of the United States because of the funding that will not be released, because of the issues concerning elements in the spending bill that some of the Republican Party members, senators, and congressmen say should not fly because they are not in consensus with the American dream, if you like. So they are going to withhold funding, except some sort of subsidiary funding or temporary funding that will be passed, that will be debated on Sunday for November, to end in November 17th. And the bone of contention is the war in Ukraine, the money, $6 billion added to their spending bill to be given to Ukraine. Is this a red flag?
Yeah, absolutely. It is it's a big red flag. And when you even look at the US, a lot of the Republicans are saying that they have their own internal issues to face. They cannot, the US is, I think, is the number one, supporter, is the number one in terms of, military aid to Ukraine and humanitarian aid and all that. So, like I said, these are some of the, forces at play, that is coming in to bear. So, and for the Russians, I think they will be, smiling and scratching their face, thinking that they're also having a go at the Western nations. So these are the things that are playing out. So, but in terms of the American, the issue in the American Congress and the Senate at the moment, I'm sure they will find a way, a compromise, so that their, economy doesn't shut down. It is really, really die over there at the moment.
Why do you think they came to this impasse? Because by and large, the American people are in support of the war against Ukraine, against, I beg your pardon, Russia. They are in support of Ukraine. And it's bipartisan support, both sides of the aisle. But it seems as the war kept on and more aid kept going to Ukraine, some people are changing their minds. Is someone dropping the ball not to carry the American public along?
Absolutely. just like here in the UK, the American public, they are in support. A lot of them believe that Russia cannot, just invade a sovereign nation in modern day 2023 is going on. So people are in support. But as you would expect, once, the finances begin to go down, once other needs of a supportive country begins to come in, people begins to, get tired. What we are seeing now with regards to this Russia-Ukraine war is that it's war weariness on every side, every country that is involved. Nations are becoming weary. And like we have always said on this program, high time people will come to the negotiating table and talk face to face. So that is the only way this crisis is going to, be brought to a peaceful end. Otherwise, it is going to drag on, and God knows when the crisis will remain.
You called it war weariness. Some analysts go as far as to say that at this point it's a frozen war. In the UK, where you are, where Rishi Sunak has been a friend of Vladimir Zelensky, traveled there and extended all the goodwill and help that the UK can and does support Ukraine with, does that sentiment remain?
Yeah, the sentiment remains. Many in the UK still believe that the support to Ukraine by the UK is the right thing to do, and they are ready for it to continue. But like we always say, you can never say for how long people will be able to endure, the harsh economic realities and the, huge defense spending. Even the UK, their defense spending will need to go up because a lot of these military hardware, equipment, and artillery that are being sent across, you have to replenish them. So that is the point where things are. But when you ask the average citizen of the United Kingdom, they support, all the aid and assistance that the Ukrainians are getting from here.
Thank you, Dr. Tony Agbans, for your insights and contributions this morning on the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Dr. Tony Agbans is a senior lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University in London. After the break, Ukraine elected to serve on the IAEA Board of Governors. Please stay with us. Welcome to the second half of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has called for an exponential increase in the production of nuclear weapons. He intends for his country to play a larger role in a coalition of nations confronting the United States in what he describes as a new Cold War. Now, Mr. Kim made the comments during a two-day session of the North's Parliament, which amended the Constitution to include his policy of expanding the country's military nuclear program. The Supreme People's Assembly meetings came after Mr. Kim had traveled to Russia this month on a trip that sparked Western concerns about a possible arms alliance in which North Korea will provide Russia with ammunition for its war on Ukraine in exchange for advanced weapons technologies. Ukraine has been elected to serve on the Board of Governors for the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. In a statement released by the agency, the information on Thursday, adding that a total of 11 new countries have elected to the 35-member board. The countries are Algeria, Armenia, Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, Ecuador, Indonesia, South Korea, the Netherlands, Paraguay, Spain, and Ukraine. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky affirms the board position will give Kyiv real opportunities to influence decisions that are binding for all IAEA members and the entire international community. Ukraine will work to implement the first point of its 10-point peace formula, which is nuclear and radiation security, and Kyiv is focused on ensuring the complete liberation of the Zaporizhzhia plant from Russian forces. The IAEA has repeatedly raised concerns as to the safety of Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is held by Russian forces, but mostly operated by a Ukrainian workforce. Shelling around what is Europe's largest nuclear power station has raised fears of a nuclear disaster. Swedish prosecutors have urged a prison sentence of up to 5 years for a Russian-Swedish citizen accused of passing Western technology to Russia's military. Sergei Vorotsov, who was arrested in a dawn raid on his suburban Stockholm home in November 2022, has lived in Sweden since the 1990s, running import-export companies. The 60-year-old is charged with committing 2 counts of unlawful intelligence activity against the United States and Sweden over the course of the decade before his arrest. Sweden's charge of unlawful intelligence activities is just a bit lower than the charge of espionage. Prosecutors have argued that he was part of a vast Russian organization built to acquire technology off limits to Moscow because of the international sanctions. The court will announce the verdict on October the 22nd. Public affairs analyst, Mr. Rafa Basaje, who speaks to us virtually from Lekki in Lagos, southwest Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Olumide. It's so nice to join you once again.
It's very good to have you. Now, you see, with what President of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, has said, does it maybe give a clue as to part of the discussions he had with President Putin when he came to Russia? Because he's calling for an exponential increase in the production of nuclear weapons. That in itself is alarming. Knowing that the international scene, nuclear-wise, doesn't seem to be as safe as before, with Iran having more freedom than before, and the United States being criticized for releasing the $6 billion, I believe, that was on hold to Iran, for which Iran say they'll use it whichever way they like, but which has made Israel nervous and Saudi Arabia nervous as well, concerning that Iran may go back to nuclear proliferation. What's your view of how safe the world is now with the whole dichotomy from both sides?
I don't, when I was following in the past the START and SALT treaties between the US and the USSR, and the question I will ask myself is, who really goes to count how many nuclear warheads the other party has? They were declaring the numbers they want to declare. That didn't mean that they had stopped producing what they want to produce. Again, the world is advancing. Science has advanced. And when you go to all these nuclear facilities of countries that are nuclear powers, you will find that there is a mixture of nationals and international persons who are working in those facilities. Mostly Indians, Pakistanis, and everybody, even Nigerians, are working in all those nuclear facilities. So the world has advanced. And there's no way you can then, what I've always asked myself, and the question people should ask, people who are interested in a nuclear safe world, is to say, what entitles one nation to possess nuclear weapons and the other is not entitled? Today, the only country that has used a nuclear weapon against another country is the United States. And no other country has used it up to now. So when we are talking about nuclear disarmament, every country should dismantle all their nuclear arsenal. And when somebody comes out to announce that there should be, he wants an ambition of, there should be increased nuclear weapons production or proliferation, he's just taking his mind. Deep down, many countries, like North Korea announced to you last week, that they are nuclear power. I didn't even expect they will announce it, but it was clear that since about 2-3 years ago, that North Korea had become a nuclear power. There are nuclear warheads, although owned by Americans, in South Korea. So why would you be trading and aiming your nuclear weapons towards North Korea, and you don't want North Korea to be similarly armed? So there is nothing to justify proliferation of nuclear weapons in the world. Every country should dismantle what they have. But I will let you bring this discourse back to how relevant this one is to the Russian and Ukrainian war. I listened to my brother a while ago, Dr. Agbons, when he was saying that Russia does its own things, conducts its affairs tactically. They are very calculating, okay? People think that they don't think. And like he said, I don't think Russia will attack any of its other neighbors without provocation. If, for instance, because of the debris, NATO then comes into the war fully, then I will just say that will be the non-domitis for a lot of the European countries. Because Russia will not have to now defend itself, and they may unleash their nuclear arsenal. So I don't think NATO will even attack Russia. Even if there's a debris that falls into any of their member countries, they will protest. But I don't think they will be senseless as to attack Russia, because that will just escalate the war.
Ukraine relies on the United States as its principal supporter around the world. President Zelensky just finished a trip from the United States. Is that aid from the U.S. in jeopardy with the threat of government spending shut down by Republican senators, including, as you pointed out to us, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, I believe, who says that unless the United States Senate withdraws the inclusion of spending for Ukraine, they will not pass the spending bill. Ergo, government shutdown. Your thoughts?
Yes, that is just the beginning. That is just the beginning of the internal crisis they are having in the U.S. and on Capitol Hill. Okay, and in as much as America is approaching this as a commercial, that is the truth. It's a commercial venture for them, and it's also strategic because of their quest to become the sole power in the world. All right, so they are pursuing two objectives. But this disagreement, when you tie it also to the impeachment moves and the fact that the Republican Party controls the GOP, the Grand Old Party controls the Senate. All right, this crisis, this is the way it stands. You know, it goes and it just lingers. Election is coming 2024. It's going to affect it. But like I posited here before in one of my appearances on this program, as soon as the Republicans come in, especially if it is Donald Trump, the Russia-Ukrainian war will stop. I can assure you that. Donald Trump has publicly mentioned that. He has mentioned it on telly, on Fox TV, and on Voice of America radio. He has voiced it that once he is able to become the president again, he will immediately stop the Russia-Ukraine war. Dr. Agbonza mentioned again, re-echoed what I mentioned when I appeared last, about strain already coming into the midst of the coalition that is supporting Ukraine. Poland, apart from the grain crisis, Poland announced last week that it will no longer supply weapons to Ukraine. And a lot of the weapons that Ukraine had started with were given to them by Poland, because Poland had been cutting over to Western-style weapons. So all the weapons of the Warsaw Pact that were left in their country, including MiG-27 jet fighters, they shipped all into Ukraine. So that is a big, how would I call it? It's a negative for Ukraine, because you know again that Poland also manufactures light frigates, light naval craft, and so on and so forth in their Gdansk shipbuilding yard. So for them to have announced publicly that they are not going to supply weapons to Ukraine is something that I see as negative for Ukraine. You know, but at the end of the day, people should go back, like I've always said, go back to the root causes of this crisis. You cannot be using different standards for different crises. And like Dr. Agbons mentioned, you can imagine that the General Assembly that just finished 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, the Ukrainian issue, the conflict, was never put on the front burner. You know, they just paid lip service to it. The UN has been very, very inactive and docile, maybe not wanting to incense America and its allies. The United Nations Secretary, if he had also done what he needed to do, maybe there would have been an impact to stop, to make him start dialogue. So they should go back to the root causes. You remember the Balkan crisis. If you're a student of history, Olumide, I know you are a master of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Go back to the Balkan crisis. No matter how much you suppress the feelings of ethnic groups, it will always resurface. It's like a seed you have sown. You know, the late Joseph Broz Tito muzzled all the ethnic groups and wielded them together into a country and called it Yugoslavia. After his death, nobody had that charisma again to keep them together, united as a country. Those sentiments that had been there from the 17th century came up again, and they are today four or five different countries. So it's the same way. If they suppress the ethnic Russians in Ukraine, who had been happy to be Ukrainians before there was this ethnic cleansing of banning the Russian language, of trying to reclaim Crimea, flush elements out of Donetsk. That was where this whole crisis started. And nobody should blame Russia for also taking action to protect two things, for its own security and also to protect ethnic Russians in Ukraine. That is where the issue is.
So another collateral effect of this conflict in Ukraine, where do you stand? And in your view, where should the world stand on the inclusion by UEFA now of under-17 participation by Russian teams, on the point that these are children who shouldn't be made to pay for the decisions of adults, which has met with a pushback from other countries? Where do you stand? Should these children, who have nothing to do with this war, but who are of Russian ethnicity, be allowed to play? And they even said that they will play with neutral flags, but they should be allowed to play. Should they be allowed to play?
They should be allowed to play because, in fact, I think the world has been unfair on Russia because FIFA, Olympics Committee and the rest, banning Russian teams or Russian athletes from competition, it's not the way to go. They are not the government. They are not the ones that started all this. I wholeheartedly think that citizens that are not in government should be allowed to carry on with their lives. I support the fact that these people should be allowed to play because it should be an injustice for whatever they are trying to do to block them. If it's allowed to stand, that would be an injustice in my own opinion.
And with that, we thank you for being with us on the program this morning. We really appreciate your contribution, your thoughts and your insights and your views on the Russian invasion. Mr. Ralph Obasanjo, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
You too. Mr. Ralph Obasanjo, who's a public affairs analyst, joined us from Lekki in Lagos. Now, when we return, International Paralympic Committee to decide on Russia and Belarus participation at the 2024 Paralympics. Welcome to the final stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Chinese importers are believed to have made large purchases of animal feed corn from Ukraine in the past 2 weeks. And to bring further information on that particular development is Laddie Williams, Channels Television business correspondent, who joins us. Laddie, good morning.
Good morning.
Love China or hate China?
Right.
They seem to be head and shoulders above a lot of countries,
yes,
economically speaking. Now, strategy speaking, what do we make of this? Chinese importers purchasing food from Ukraine in the past 2 weeks.
Quite an interesting
and they
turn of
are one of Russia's principal allies.
Exactly. So yeah, because every time I come here, we're talking about how much China is buying from Russia when it comes to oil and grains and all of that. But this time, we're hearing that China is actually buying grains from Ukraine, which is a big boost, to the Ukrainian economy, because when China is one of your biggest buyers of anything, that that's a good market that you want to keep. So we'll see, traditionally, they've always been the biggest buyers of corn from Ukraine, and they use that mostly for their animal feed. That's China. So we're seeing importers now. This information is coming from traders, in that market. They're saying that a huge ton of corn has been bought by China and Europe, actually, from Ukraine, between about 500,000 tons to about 1 million, tons. That's what Europe has actually bought, at this time. So it's good for definitely the Ukrainian economy because they've been through a lot, Russia pulling out from the Black Sea grain deal, that's impacted, how they transport their grains. So we're seeing, there are other routes they're able to use at this time, which China is making use of, because at the end of the day, Ukraine, they have the cheapest corn right now in the market. So it only makes economic sense, if you're a big buyer, like China, to actually still buy from them, even though you are a strong ally of Russia. So, yeah, it's all geopolitics at the end of the day, but business still has to be done at this point.
Will we know whether it's a one-off purchase, or it's
been a consistent,
will become a policy?
It's been a consistent, purchase, according to traders in that market, and they say that it's expected that it will actually continue, because it's still, Ukrainian corn is still the cheapest, right now in the market. So it remains to be seen what happens with prices, going forward. Maybe if Ukrainian corn gets to market price, who knows what will happen next. But right now, they are buying, Ukrainian corn. Talking about China and Europe, because it's cheap.
So one wonders how easy or hard it'll be to criticize China, that is from Ukraine, if the Chinese are buying your stuff and helping you.
Yeah, because now you can't say they're fully backing Russia at this point.
Exactly. Thereby they're indirectly helping you against the Russians.
Yeah. So
who you claim that they are aiding and abetting.
Right. So shall we call them neutral at this point? Maybe? No?
No.
Maybe called business.
Chinese. That's up in the air. Russian oil sold to India at 30% above Western price cap, and that's according to traders.
Yeah, traders are giving us a lot of information this morning, and since the West put the cap on Russian oil, that was supposed to be $60. So anything above $60, you're not going to get Western services, from insurance to shipping. So that has been in place since last year, but apparently we're seeing Russian euros actually selling above $60, selling about $80. That's about $20 more than the price cap, which is a challenge for Europe at this time, because at the end of the day, they're trying to, clamp down on Russia's war machine. They're trying to squeeze, all that income they're getting from oil, but at this point, they're still selling above that level. And at the end of the day, we see Russian euros, that's their oil grade. It's quite, attractive. Most of these countries like that, especially India. India is the biggest importer of Russian euros at this point, and it gives, good yields when it comes to diesel. So they get more diesel when they use Russian euros. That's their own grade. It gives more yields for diesel, and with the ban, Russia earlier banning the export of diesel, that impacted how much India was now importing, from the euros from Russia. So at the end of the day, we're seeing that dynamic play out. But Russia did remove that ban recently also, but that definitely impacted prices. So India actually, flipped back, started buying more euros at above that price, which is about $80. So at the end of the day, this is going to impact definitely Russia's revenue. They're still going to be making good money.
I can see how beneficial it is, sorry to interrupt you, to India, to Russia, but how to India?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we see prices now about $93, for Brent. WTI is still above, $90. So at the end of the day, euros, $80 is still not bad, when you look at market prices, but it's still going to make things difficult for Europe at this point, because they're trying to squeeze how much, revenue, Russia's getting from oil. But at the end of the day, they're selling above $60, and they're not going to like that. Thanks,
Laddie. And for more business news, aside from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, please join Laddie Williams on Business Morning.
Thank you.
After this program. Thanks, Laddie.
Thank you.
Now, Ukrainian authorities are calling on ordinary Russians to oppose the forced deportation of children to Russia and help bring them back home to Ukraine. The mass deportations of Ukrainian children to Russia or Russian-occupied territory over the course of the war has resulted in the International Criminal Court issuing arrest warrants for Russia's Children's Rights Commissioner, Maria Lvova-Belova, and President Vladimir Putin. On Wednesday, Ukraine's state-run Freedom TV launched the If You Know, Tell campaign in partnership with the Presidential Commissioner for Children's Rights and Ukraine's Police Child Protection Team. Finally, the International Paralympic Committee is to decide whether Russian and Belarusian athletes will take part in the Paris 2024 Paralympic Games. The decision, which is to take place today, will see the IPC choosing one of three options when discussing the topic at its General Assembly in Bahrain. They can vote to ban Russia and Belarus from the Games, allow them to compete as neutrals with no flag or anthem, or let them take part without any restrictions. Last year, the IPC suspended the Paralympic committees of both countries and banned their athletes from competing following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022.
We work together. We have from an operational side, when it comes to the games, we work in a very integrated way. But we have different organizations, we have different constituencies, and we have different governance structures. So from time to time, we may make different decisions on similar topics. And again, it's something that both organizations are aware of, that we may have different decisions. The organizing committee is aware of, and the French government is aware of, that we may have two different approaches when it comes to Russian Belarus participation at both the Olympic and the Paralympic. Well, I would not like to speculate about that exactly, because I want the membership to take that decision. That's why we are bringing that decision to the General Assembly, which is the highest decision-making body of our organization. So, the difference now is that we are providing a third option, which is because we will have three options now on the table, which will be full suspension, partial suspension with neutrals, and no suspension. So because whatever decision we take, or the membership take, will have an effect on Paris 2024. So we have to have those options on the table, which is different from the decision that was taken in last November, which was then overturned by the appeals panel.
And that's it for today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Many thanks for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Have a good day.